Welcome. A week ago, I created a video that ran for more than an hour. It addressed the important skills that are required of all college students. Now, I'd like to take sections from that longer video and present them as multiple shorter videos so that they're easier to digest. If you've already watched my college skills complete video, there's no need to watch the videos that are in this series. It's a repetition of material. But if you haven't watched that longer video yet, I encourage you to watch this video and the others in the series because the topics that I address really are important to all college students. Stay on track. Know when your responsibilities come due and create a schedule for yourself that allows you to meet all of your responsibilities. Now, I've observed some students who have told me that they keep a large physical calendar in their dormitory room and use colored markers and different colored post-it notes to track when their responsibilities are due, when an assignment is due, when a test comes up, when is their club meeting. That's fine. If that works for you, use it. But I encourage you to use a digital information management system, such as a digital calendar that can synchronize among your computer, your tablet, and your phone, and be accessible through a web browser interface from someone else's computer. That way you have access to your schedule of your to-do list, your reminder list, your calendar of activities. You'd have access to this information from multiple sources. The problem with the large calendar that hangs on the dormitory wall is it's only useful when you're in your dormitory room. So while you may want to use that because one, it looks pretty, two, it's easy to use, and three, you're familiar with that format, fine. I'm not saying don't use it. I'm saying also transfer that data to a digital system. And I think you will find that once you're using the digital system, you have much greater control over your scheduling information, and you may forego using the physical medium of the calendar that hangs on the wall. Now, I work on Mac computers, so I use a combination of the Apple Calendar program, the Apple Reminders program. Let's see, I'm just looking at some of the icons on my screen. Those are the two big ones I use for managing my schedule, the Apple Calendar and the Apple Reminders. And the data that I enter into my calendar and my reminders apps synchronize to my phone, my iPad, and are also available through the iCloud webpage. So I can get to them even from I can get to that information even using someone else's computer. The days of carrying an appointment minder around, and you may not even have seen one of these during your lifetime. More than 20 years ago, approaching 30 years ago, until then, I regularly carried a little leather booklet that was a daily calendar, and in it I could write all my appointments and my things to do. I saw a student using something similar to that for the first time in more than a decade, about a year ago. And I challenged the student. I said, what would happen if you lost that physical book? And the student says, oh my God, my life would fall apart. Exactly. Don't rely on physical media if for your most vital information. And that's why I'm so passionate about using a digital calendaring and reminder system. So enough said about that. It's about the work that you've produced. But still, it can sometimes feel like the person who is giving us advice to change the work we've produced, it can feel a bit personal. It's not. I do not give students personal advice. Rather, I give them advice about how they can improve the quality of their academic work. You can expect to get feedback on every assignment that you submit, especially if it's a written assignment. On a test or an exam, you may get just a grade with identification of which items you, for which items you selected an incorrect answer. But on a written paper, as all my students know, I often write about as much in feedback as they wrote in the body of the paper. I have had students that did such excellent work that all I could do was compliment their work. But those students are few and far between. I can almost always find something that I would recommend a student do differently that would improve the quality of their work. And I tell them that and show them how to improve the quality of their work. In class, as a group of students, you may occasionally receive feedback from your professor. Sometimes a professor might say to the entire class, compared to prior semesters, your performance is better than or less than the prior semester's students' work. A professor might address the entire class and say, I'm noticing a common problem in your work. Let's spend some time talking about that. And then the instructor, the professor can offer instruction on how to repair the mistakes that are common among all students in the class. But the most important feedback that you will get is the personal feedback when from the instructor who advises you to do something differently in a particular assignment. So be prepared to get some very pointed feedback, very direct. It's not about you, it's about your work. So try to remember that. And it makes it a little bit easier to accept the critical comments that the instructor will offer. One of the general skills required of all college students is the ability to demonstrate critical thinking, the ability to look logically at data and help convert that data into information without allowing personal preferences, biases, opinions to color the information that is produced from the received data. But this also requires being tolerant of ambiguity. often when conducting research, a student will come upon multiple experts who have written about a topic, and each expert has reached conclusions that are contrary to another expert. Be prepared for that. When it comes to most things in the world, these things aren't black and white. There's not clear right and wrong when it comes to analysis of information. There's not a clear truthfulness, falseness in the philosophical sense. There are truths and lies, but when I use the word truth and falsity, it's sometimes based on the data that one has considered. One will reach a particular conclusion that is philosophically truthful based on the data. Someone who reviews different data may reach a different conclusion that contradicts the other conclusion, and this second conclusion is still truthful because it's based on different data. So be prepared. College will require you to be tolerant of ambiguity. Observe your own biases and opinions. It's okay to have them, but don't allow them to color the judgment that you make of information that you create from data that you've acquired. In other words, be dispassionate about the arguments that you make in your academic papers. You will frequently be asked to write a paper that takes a position that's contrary to your preference. This definitely will occur in any class that requires a debate, but it occurs in most classes, not just philosophy classes. You may be passionate about ecology, yet in a business class be asked to write a paper in favor of greater industrialization that takes advantage of ecological resources. It happens. Be dispassionate. Allow your arguments to be based on the data you've acquired from expert sources, and the work that you write in your college level, whether oral presentations or written work, doesn't have to reflect what you prefer. It reflects what you have observed from the data that have been presented by experts. And always seek to synthesize knowledge. In high school, you were likely asked to report on what an expert said, or what a journalist said, or any data producer. In college, we're asking you to synthesize knowledge by taking data from multiple experts, putting that data together, and creating information that was not fully addressed by any one individual of the data sources. So this idea of synthesizing knowledge doesn't mean making up arguments out of whole cloth. In college, we'll be asking you to make arguments that reflect the findings of expert sources. And frequently, those sources are not in perfect agreement with one another in the arguments that they each have presented. One of the broad skills that businesses frequently ask universities to teach to students is communication. By far, the most common complaint I have heard from employers is that students coming out of university cannot write at a level that's appropriate within that organization. But more than just writing, I think we also need to be honest with ourselves and say, we may not read well enough either. So I'm going to encourage you now to improve your reading comprehension and to expand the vocabulary that you're able to use effectively, and to recognize that English is not a single language. There are varieties of English, and not just dialects, but English is used in different ways around the world. For example, in a previous video, I made a comment regarding the use of between and among. In America, the word between can be used between this and that. So between you and me, there is agreement. Or between 5 and 10, there exists 6, 7, 8, 9, as well as fractions and decimals. However, and in America, we use the word among when showing some type of shared element among 3 or more entities, such as among us to an American indicates at least 3 people are being addressed. However, in Britain and sometimes in South Africa and in India, the word between can be used both to indicate what exists between 2 entities or between multiple entities. Whereas in America, we would have used the word among. Speakers of British English can use between. In America, we use the word toward, meaning I am going toward the sunset. In Britain, it's very common to say I am going towards, with an S on the end, towards the sunset. So towards is preferred in British English. Toward is preferred in American English. And there are many other distinctions because there's more than just British and American English. As you're conducting research at the university level, you will find that you are reading material or listening to videos or podcasts from sources that were not produced, or from sources that are not American, such as you may listen to BBC English news broadcasts from England. You may listen to Deutsche Welle, the German news and documentary services. Even though these sources are speaking or writing in English, it may not be the same English to which you were exposed living here in America. And to those of you who grew up outside of America, but now either did or at least now speak English, please, not all Americans think there's only one type of English. my experience is most of us Americans think that American English is English. However, I still meet sufficient number of people who recognize that, there's American English, there's British English, there's South African English, Australian English. So there are multiple versions of English around the world. When it comes to writing, know the format in which you should write. If you're asked to write a memo, write a memo. Don't write a term paper. If you're asked to write a term paper, don't write a memo. Make sure you focus on a specific topic. Make sure that the arguments you present in your written work are cohesive, that they fit together. And academic writing is generally more formal than colloquial language. Now, there are exceptions. You may take a class in poetry or literature, or you may take a theater class in which you're asked to write in a colloquial manner. But outside of those disciplines, most of your academic written work needs to use standard American English with what we generally call formal punctuation and avoiding the use of colloquialisms. For example, one that really bothers me is when students use the phrase a lot to mean many. And I tell my students, you can use the phrase a lot in two contexts in my class. If you wish to talk about the parcel of undeveloped land next to your house, that's a lot. Or if you're attending an auction and you're buying a group of items that are sold together, that's called a lot. Other than that, don't use a lot in my class. And of course, even though I tell students that students use it in their papers and then get frustrated when they don't earn 100% as a grade. Because if I tell you to not do something and you do it anyway, expect that I will reduce the grade you earn on that assignment. In regard to speaking at college, all the same requirements that exist for writing also exist for speaking. Plus, attend to your volume, your clarity, and your diction. I am hard of hearing in one ear, and when I'm lecturing, not during COVID, but prior to COVID, I wore a hearing aid. And I specifically got the hearing aid tuned to the pitch of the typical 18 to 21-year-old female voice. That's the pitch that's difficult for me to hear. I hear people with a deep voice. I hear people with a very high voice, but it's that right in the area of about 1,000 kilohertz that is typical for a post-adolescent female voice. It's difficult for me to hear. I would tell students, I wear a hearing aid, I'm hard of hearing, I even cut my ear when they're speaking, and I would get very frustrated when the students who I had a difficult time hearing didn't speak loudly. Speak up. Any of your professors who are obviously over the age of 50 are probably even though they may not like to admit it, they are probably getting a little bit hard of hearing. Speak up, be heard, be understood, be clear, don't mumble. Now, all rules were off during COVID when we had returned to the classroom wearing masks. That was just, that was a nightmare. But we're coming out of the pandemic. We're entering the endemic stage of the coronavirus pandemic, and we are going to take off our masks. Maybe not in 2022, but we'll probably be taking off our masks in the classroom in the next coming years. I am very much looking forward to being able to see my students' faces again. But I want them to speak up. So I am encouraging you, speak up, be heard, be clear, and be understood. I hope you found this portion of the video interesting. I will continue this discussion of general skills required of all college students in the next part of this video series.